Welcome to our Natural Habitat Adventures daily dose of nature. Who's the best bear in the world? Our presenters today, Eddie Savage, Brad Joseph, Drew Hamilton, and Annie Van Denther. We've got a great presentation for you, and I think we're first going to start by turning it over to Eddie, who is going to kick it off and tell us all about the bear he's chosen as the best in the world. Welcome, Eddie.
Hi, everybody. Really nice to be here, but I'm going to hand it over to Annie.
Hi, guys. First, I just want to let you know who's going to do what here. So I'm going to be representing the polar bear, which is clearly the winner. And then Brad Josephs is going to be doing the sun bear. Drew Hamilton is representing the brown bear. And Eddie is going to be representing the panda. Brad?
Yep. You can click to the next slide there, Eddie.
Should be showing up. Can you see it?
Yep, there it is. Okay, so guys, we have 8 species of bears in the world, and we only could pick 4 presenters, and we each chose the bear that we wanted to represent. So I'll start from smallest to biggest. The smallest one is the sun bear at the far left. And you can see in size relation, I mean, how much smaller it is than the polar bear. Basically, it can crawl up and fit into the bicep of a polar bear. And then as we move over, so that's going to be represented by myself. Then we go over to another bear that I love a lot as well, but had to just pick one, and that's the moon bear, or Asiatic black bear. Lives in Russia and basically all through Asia down into the Himalayas. And then moving over, next we have the giant panda. And Eddie will be taking that and tell you all about the panda. Then some of these other bears, very few people have heard of. There's the sloth bear, which lives in the same habitat as tigers in India. So it's India, Sri Lanka, some of the special habitats in South Asia. And really cool thing about that bear is when the cubs move along with the mother, they're always right on her back. That's the only bear that will always do that is traveling. So they're really neat, and they deserve somebody to vote for them as well. Then we have another very unknown bear, the spectacled bear. It lives in the high mountains of South America, in the Andes, and extremely endangered because of a lot of habitat conversion in South America, but that is the South America's only bear. Then we have the American black bear, which everybody's probably the most familiar with, since a lot of people live in places where American black bears live. And then we have the brown bear, which Drew will talk about, and the polar bear. So just kind of a cool slide to show you all the different bears of the world. Good, Eddie? Switch to the next slide, Eddie, I think.
Yeah, I think there's just a delay on it.
Yeah, no problem. So this is kind of interesting. We're going to do the order of which bears we chose is based on when they split off and evolved into themselves. So all the bears and the dogs and the raccoons, they all originated from this small arboreal carnivore known as the myosid, and there's a little picture of them. So that's where all our dogs and bears evolved from. And then as evolution happened, certain animals just took certain niches. And you can see the panda was the first to split off from the other bear and become basically very herbivorous, and said, I'm going to go vegetarian. And it just basically went on its way and hasn't changed much. And this could be 20 million years or something. So a lot of it's just hard to know. And then the other bears split off into the spectacled bear split into its own subfamily called the Tromacterae, and went off into South America and did its thing. And then you have the rest of the bears, which is the subfamily of Ursidae, which is called the real bears. Sorry, Eddie, because panda is genetically has been said it is a bear. It is in the bear family, but just barely. Okay, Eddie, I'm good. Oh, no, wait, stop. And then as the evolution happened, the most recent sort of divergence in two species was the polar bear and the brown bear, which split off from each other most recently. So that's why they're actually pretty close together, despite their differences. Drew?
So important in any discussion about which bear is the best is going to be the geographics of where these bears are located. So we've got a map up here right now just to help people get their bearings a little bit. Starting at the top of the world with the polar bears, you'll see their area shaded in green. Now they are classified as a marine mammal, so most of the habitat they're going to occupy is actually sea ice, right? So you can see that somebody's pointing it out up top there. Many of you have probably gone to Churchill to see polar bears, so this should be familiar to you. Churchill is, of course, it's right towards the southern end of their extent. So we're looking at the southern end of the population there. The brown bears you'll see scattered in kind of a, what color is that? A salmon color. Oh, that's appropriate. Across the center of the map there. Now, at this point, I will mention that brown bears and grizzly bears, for the purpose of this argument, are going to be the same thing. It's all Ursus arctos, right? So brown bears, grizzly bears habitat that kind of boreal mid-latitude range, but this is a very shrunken range from their traditional habitat. Brown bears, grizzly bears used to range all the way down into northern Mexico, and their habitat has been diminished over the last century or so. We'll jump over to the giant panda. They're in China. They're very limited range. So if you look, what color are they in there? Green? No, they're blue. Oh, look how tiny that is. Just those little blue dots are the only place you can go to see panda bears. And then the sun bears are in Southeast Asia. The place I usually associate with sun bears is Borneo, and we'll be talking about the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center when Brad does his piece. But they're down in Southeast Asia in just those little pink islands. If you look kind of up and to the left from Australia there. So that hopefully will let you get your bearings on what we're going to be talking about today. And I do have to apologize to the other 4 species of bear. Just when we were coming down to this, we didn't have enough time, so we took the top 4.
All righty. And so thanks, Drew. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Annie. So when it comes down to how we're going to kind of figure out which bear is best, we've broken down what we're going to talk about each bear into these 5 categories. So intelligence, intelligence, it can really mean quite a lot of things, but how well is that bear perhaps at using its environment, using its brain size just to make things work for it? Can it solve problems? Can it find different food sources? What happens when it interacts with other bears? That kind of stuff. So we're going to be kind of breaking it down with intelligence for the bears. Strength, that one is pretty obvious. How strong are your bears? This comes down to jaw strength, muscle strength, can be size. How much can they bench press? That kind of stuff. We just really want to kind of hammer down the strength of your bear. So each of us will go through and describe the strengths, the muscular strength of our bears. And then adaptability. So some bears are definitely more adaptable than others, utilizing many different environments throughout their ranges can make or break a bear. Some bears, perhaps like the panda or perhaps like the polar bear, have really strict habitats that they can thrive in, whereas bears like the brown bear maybe can be more adaptable. So we'll kind of break that down. Now, the last 2 are really big. So keystone value, basically keystone species, or how an animal fits into its ecosystem, fits into its environment, perhaps can provide benefit to the environment or improve the environment, and what maybe happens when the bear disappears from the environment, what might happen. So that's very important, is to kind of describe its value to the environment that it's in, along with a few other details. And then human perception, that's where we all come in. What makes that bear exciting to us? What are our preconceived notions about that bear? How does the media look at the bear? How do humans as a whole feel about those bears, and how does that fit into potentially some conservation programs globally? It could be nationally, it could be locally, it could be internationally. We're going to kind of break it down with human perception as well. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into giant panda intelligence. Now, if it was up to me, I would say that these bears were pretty clever because they broke off from the other bears 22 million years ago. They're kind of like, you know what? I don't need these other bears. And they found themselves a niche where all they've got to do day to day is basically hang out in the same area. They don't have to walk very far. They've adapted to eating this food, bamboo, that they're eating all day, every day. It's kind of like being semi-retired in the beautiful countryside of China, if you ask me. So they've really figured it out, and they made themselves super cute, so that people want to save them. So that was a pretty smart move they made 22 million years ago. Definitely the long-term game to find the proceeds of that, but they did well. But on a more serious note, when it comes down to giant panda intelligence, they don't have the same intelligence levels of some of the other bears, and part of that maybe has to do with their food source. So in this picture on your screen here, you can see that I've got 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4. There was a study done at a Chinese university with captive giant pandas, where they tried to understand the giant panda's spatial recognition or spatial memory. So what they did is they had 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in one of those boxes they put a food reward, and I've kind of identified that with that bamboo. And so what the pandas did repetitively is they would go to box number 1, check and see if there's anything in there. Box number 2, check and see if there's anything in there. Box number 3, check and see if there's anything in there. Hey, good, they got the reward, and then that would be kind of the end of the test. Now, if the bear had a strong spatial memory, the next test, the bear should have gone directly to number 3, like the green dotted line points to. The bear should have skipped box 1 and 2 and just gone to 3 to be like, oh yeah, I remember there was a food reward in box 3, so I should just go back there and check it out first. But no, the pandas didn't. They just went back to box number 1, box number 2, and then found the reward again in box number 3. So they didn't really learn that box number 3 held the reward, but they did learn that boxes contain food rewards, at least within the framework of that study. So not as smart as some of the other bears. Like just with brown bears, for example, if they discover that there's a food source, sorry, I'm stepping on your toes here, Drew, but just in contrast.
Just proving my case.
Yeah, but you know, as far as intelligence goes, if a brown bear was to find a salmon creek that had a load of salmon, that bear would remember where that creek was for most of its life, if not its whole life, and come back and check probably around the same time of year to see if there's any food reward in that creek again. So, but I'll let Drew kind of complete that. So I can't really say they're the smartest bears. When it comes to strength, their strength really shows up in their jaw and in their skull. So imagine sitting there crunching bamboo stalks for 14 to 16 hours per day, hundreds of stalks, 25 to 85 pounds of bamboo ingested every single day. And you've got to crunch this super fibrous, hard substance. You got to break open bamboo stalks to get at the tender inner bits. And you've got to rely pretty much, not so much on your arm strength for breaking down that bamboo. It's easy enough to snap it, but you got to use your teeth to bite into that every single time. And so where we see big differences in the bears is just look at the giant panda skull on the left. It's definitely rounder. And you can see right at the very top of the skull, it almost looks like a mohawk on there. That's the sagittal crest, and that's where the mandibles attach, the big muscles that would basically attach to that lower jawbone and help this bear crunch and crush that bamboo and chew it and shred it all day long for its entire life. Whereas on the right, you can see that there's a polar bear skull, doesn't have as pronounced a sagittal crest, and its skull is much longer, which is a different adaptation for a different purpose, but it doesn't have the same crushing strength that the giant panda skull would have. So giant pandas, definitely a strong bite. Another strength that giant pandas have is their ability to make themselves comfortable high up in the trees wherever they are. one of their adaptations, I guess, and one of their the things that they would use their body strength for is they climb trees. They definitely learned that from times when they had predators that lived within the same range as them. So tigers, leopards, wolves potentially, predators that may have attacked them would have shared the same habitat. Not so much today anymore. They've been widely extirpated throughout giant panda range, so they don't really have those predators around anymore. But they still keep the behavior of climbing trees. So they'll climb these trees, and they'll honestly, observing them and some of the research bases in China, they will. It seems like they could climb, face up, face down. They could look like they're almost going to fall out of the tree, but actually they've got it. So they've got really strong arms, really good balance, and they can really find any place in a tree, climb up to it, and make themselves comfortable, just like this panda cub did here. Adaptability, again, low marks for the giant panda. Low marks for the giant panda on adaptability. They've kind of gotten themselves into a bit of a corner as far as their food source goes. So their food source being bamboo makes up 99%, more than 99% of their diet in many cases, is all that they eat. Where there's no bamboo, panda won't be able to survive. And so the pockets in which there is bamboo available today is very, very small. And with encroaching development, with climate change, the amount of bamboo, or the amount of area where bamboo will exist in the future is kind of an unknown. Essentially, the bamboo forest will be moving farther up the mountains, and of course, a mountain kind of like a pyramid. The higher up the mountain you get, the less bamboo there is. And so eventually, if temperatures continue warming, giant pandas are going to kind of be out of habitat and be further fragmented from other bears. And it's taken them 22 million years to get to the point where they can feast on bamboo all day long and survive. And so we can only suspect it will take a very long time for them to be able to adapt away from that. If you plunk them down into a different habitat where they'd have to think on their feet, they would probably starve. And this happened in the 1970s in Sichuan province. There was a bamboo flowering event, something that only happens every 50 to 100 years, depending on the bamboo species. And many pandas ended up starving to death because the bamboo flowered and died, which is part of its life cycle. So they couldn't find alternate food sources. Troubling. Just some cute panda pics here. This is their habitat. Very, very lush, dense, beautiful, mountainous. Now, when it comes to keystone value, giant pandas are off the charts as far as keystone value goes. Giant pandas within their environments, they definitely disturb a lot of the landscape. By sitting in one patch, they could break down bamboo stalks, they could chew up bamboo. By breaking down the bamboo stalks, they're allowing areas of the forest floor to get sunshine that previously wouldn't have gotten sunshine, potentially allowing for different species of plants to grow up in and around the areas where pandas have been feeding. Now they also, bamboo typically doesn't lose its leaves very often. So the giant panda will eat the leaves, they'll eat the stalks, they'll chew it up, they'll grind it, partially digest it, and leave over 100 scats every single day lying around the forest floor, partially digested, ready to be taken by microorganisms and decomposed further, providing some form of nutrients to the areas where they live. Another little one within their environment would be they often use the same trails or similar trails, which could create a navigation network that not only pandas use, but other smaller animals could use to navigate through the forest. And these would be trails that would be used over 10, 50, 100, in some cases, hundreds of years. Now, this is a theme that you're going to see a lot, is the giant panda as an umbrella species. Now, we have to go back to the 1970s to really understand this. When the World Wildlife Fund and the Chinese government decided to do a very lengthy investigation into populations of giant pandas, they discovered that there was maybe 900 to 1,000 left in the wild. And immediately, giant panda reserves were established by the Chinese government. And every year, we're seeing more and more of these giant panda reserves come into play. Now, what these panda reserves did is they essentially protected critical habitat for the giant pandas, but not just the giant pandas. Some of the areas like the Sichuan giant panda sanctuaries, which are to the west of Chengdu in the Chonglai Minshan mountain ranges. It's some of the most biodiverse forests outside of tropical rainforests. And you can have over 4,000 species of plants and over 100 different species of mammals within that area. And so, do you think in the 1970s, if it wasn't for the giant panda, these tracts of diverse forests would have been protected, say to protect the golden snub-nosed monkey or to protect the golden takin? The golden snub-nosed monkey, today there's only 12,000 of them left. We can say with some amount of confidence that if it wasn't for the giant panda, this endangered primate would be extinct. It wouldn't have a range to be in. And we can say the same for the golden takin. There's only about 12,000 takin left on Earth as well, and they share much of the same range as the giant panda. So we're also talking another animal that maybe wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the giant panda and the protections that were put in place for the giant panda. So they are significant umbrella species protecting millions of animals within their ranges. And here's just a look at the giant panda habitat today. There's not very much giant panda habitat left. It used to extend a long way, but this is essentially where they live and mostly what's protected. So 67 giant panda nature reserves, about 66% of pandas live within those reserves or in immediate bordering areas. And that wild population has increased about 15% from the last count to 1,864. And there should be a new count coming out in the coming years as well to give us a better idea. So now that comes down to human perception, another thing that giant pandas score high on. And I like to say, look at this picture. Look at that bear hanging in the tree, arm up over its head, looking back over its head. It's just a really cute and eye-catching animal. If you were to take a picture of a giant panda and show it to pretty much anybody in this world, anybody anywhere on any continent, they'd probably be able to say, that's a giant panda. They might even say, that's a giant panda, it's so cute. Because they are the most recognized of the bears, absolutely. They're the movie stars of the bears, even though there's so few of them. We can say approximately 1,864 in the wild, and then another 450 or so in captivity. Now, the picture on the screen here, this goes for another part of the human perception, which is people love bears. They, especially in China, you have 1 in 5 people on this planet that have decided to make giant pandas their national treasure. 1 in 5 people on the planet, 1.42 billion people look at the giant panda as the national treasure. It has an incredible conservation value in that way. There's huge amounts of money that are put towards giant pandas. The 450 bears that are in the giant panda breeding centers and zoos around the world are all benefactors of that force. Now, it's not just in China where the money that's thrown towards giant pandas is huge. It's around the world, and that quite simply goes to a place like maybe the San Diego Zoo. If they wanted to have a pair of pandas at the San Diego Zoo, they're looking at paying about $1 million to have those giant pandas there at the zoo every year. It's kind of like a lease from the government. And those giant panda visits often go together with large political trade moves as well. So they're incredibly important within China, within the world, internationally, and people just end up loving them. I mean, look at this. This is at the Giant Panda Kindergarten in a place called Wolong, where they have all these 1-year-old babies, baby pandas that are celebrating that are having their birthday celebrated for them, with the big one up at the top there, out in the public. Now, this is an example of what I call pandemonium. So people love bears. Some of the giant panda bases in China, I mean, if you actually look closely, under the umbrella on the right side of the screen, there is one baby panda sitting on a blanket. And that's what those people are here to see. There's a few more up farther, but that's what the people are here to see. They want to see the baby pandas. They want to see the pandas. They are the national treasure, and there's not just huge draw from national tourism in China, but international tourism, people coming to visit to see them. It is truly pandemonium. Aren't they pretty? Beautiful bears. So with that being said, folks, intelligence, as we discussed, kind of a 3.5 out of 5. Strength, they're not the strongest, they're not the biggest, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Adaptability, they've really kind of put themselves into the corner with their specific diet of bamboo, so I give it a 1.5 out of 5. Now, I don't do this very often. I kind of went off the charts, but with keystone value, the fact that they are so important to those ecosystems, and without their presence, there's likely to be dozens of animals that would no longer be on this earth, or at least have, we might not know if they exist on this, or if they ever existed on this earth. I give these animals a 7 out of 5 because wherever they live, the animals around them are so protected. And also just as rare as the giant panda. And then cultural value, again, 7 out of 5 because of that extraordinary international presence, that international draw. And my mistake on the slide, that should say human perception. People love giant pandas. And as my final words to you folks on my giant panda thing, I think you all should love giant pandas too, the most, because it truly is the best bear of all the bears. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. So now it's Brad's turn.
Okay, everybody, is my screen the way it's supposed to be?
Yep. Look, it was,
Okay.
and now it's not. Now it is. We're good.
Okay. Great. Hey, thank you, Eddie. Eddie guides our China expeditions, as I do as well. And Eddie, you're a great ambassador and spokesman for the giant panda. So thank you very much. Excellent job, and I agree on all your scoring points. But I'm going to talk about sun bears. I've been guiding in Borneo for the NatHab trips since 2015, and I've done some other work and exploration there before that, and I volunteered at the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center that is in Borneo. So I have lots of firsthand experience and enough experience that I truly fell in love with sun bears. And I think they're the underdog of the bears. That's why I picked them, because actually they need the most love. So hopefully I'll convince you guys to pick the sun bear, because we can serve what we love. And the sun bear, among all the other bears that we're representing today, need the most efforts to conserve. So they need the most love. So as far as intelligence goes, I'll have to say that all bears are super smart, and smarter than the smartest dogs. Maybe not so much the giant panda, but in my opinion, all the bears are very sharp. They have big brains and they know how to figure things out. And in my working with the sun bears, I noticed you can just tell that they are very sentient beings, and they figure things out and they solve problems and puzzles. One small example that I noticed was when I first started working behind the scenes in the bear house at the conservation center, which I'll explain at the end here of my little turn. I noticed that when I first walked in to the facility, the bears took one look at me and just freaked out because they can recognize a person in a second, and they've either built trust with that person or not. And it only took about 2 days before they were like, oh, that's that guy. He's cool. So I was impressed with how fast. As far as other things, they're basically, they use tools. Like this is they have learned to build nests in trees, in the tops of the trees. That's a way for them to get off of the very humid forest floor that has some sort of lots of pests, insects that kind of bother them, like land leeches, ants, things like that, that would bother them if they're resting. So in other predators, they're much safer when they're far up in the tree canopy. So they've learned to build nests, which I think is pretty neat. You're talking about using tools. Well, learning how to build a nest in order to sleep in is a very unique thing with the bears. And so it's very smart. I also have to say, as far as intelligence goes, sun bears score really high, in my opinion, because of all the ecosystems that we're talking about today where these bears live. The Borneo and the Southeast Asian rainforest, because of their diversity, is extremely complex. You basically got 6% of the biodiversity in the world and 1% of the area. It's a place with, I think, 3,000 species of trees, 12,000 species of flowering plants. So to make a living and learn what's poisonous, what's not, what's edible, where's that edible tree going to fruit, it's a very, very complicated place. So they definitely get really high scores for intelligence in that way. As far as I heard a story, I haven't seen it, but the sun bears will break apart a termite nest that's made of mud. Then they just shake the contents out on their chest, and they use their chest hair as a filter to basically shake the dust out, and then inside these hairs are caught the larvae and the termites. So that's really cool. So all the bears are super smart. Sun bears, no exception, but they live in a very complex place, and I'm impressed with their intelligence. Strength. Well, obviously, I'm going to have a hard time convincing everybody that they rank high among the other bears for strength, because the sun bear is very small. It is only the big male in Bornean sun bear is 100 pounds. How can that possibly compare to a polar bear that is 1,200 pounds? I mean, a big male sun bear could fit inside the bicep of a big male polar bear. But I beg you guys to consider the strength for their size. Their muscle density is unbelievable. And this picture just shows a good example. This is Dr. Wong, and I'll talk about it a little bit at the end. And the sun bear's ability to break out of a mini culvert trap that's made of steel, basically by just clawing with its tremendous strength until you get a small hole, and then it's able to get a big enough hole that both its claws can fit into, and just like Superman, just bend that metal back. So that was kind of a lesson. Sun bears are not easy to catch. There's another couple examples that Dr. Wong basically, you just couldn't make a trap. And I've never heard of another bear doing anything like this. You just chew and blast right through wood. So this is I'll just let those pictures do the talking. We're talking about a small animal, 80-pound bear maybe even smaller, with supernatural strength. So they're small, but not for their size. By far, for their size, not only the strongest bear in the world, but in my opinion, the strongest animal in the world. And the reason they're so strong is they're having to carve out a living in Borneo, so many different variety of foods, such as the inner bark of trees that it has to rip apart, digging into termite nests that are built into the trunks of trees. So pretty incredible. Adaptability, they rank very high in my opinion, because again, well, they have to adapt to such a complex environment. And also, the way the Borneo rainforest works is it's a lot of feast or famine. It's not an easy place to make a living. There are mass fruiting events, and you have to be there. You have to have a sixth sense about which fruit trees are going to fruit at certain times, and it's very complicated. It'd take a long time to explain it all. But if you miss the mark on a fig fruiting event because you didn't figure out to be there before the hornbills and all the other primates ate all the fruit, you've just missed out. And then you have to be smart enough during the non-fruiting seasons in order to use your fallback skills in becoming mostly an insectivore. So, very, very adaptable to a very, very difficult climate, ecosystem to make a living in. So they're very adaptable. They're also have adapted. Their amazing niche is to live up in trees. And although most of the bears do climb, the other bears' climbing ability, nothing compared to the sun bear. So most of the food, the fruits and insects and termites and things like that actually go on up in the canopy. So they have to go hundreds of feet up. And to watch sun bears in the forest is fantastic. I wish I could show a video. If you ever go to my YouTube channel, I made a whole video on sun bears climbing, of my own footage, and I edited it together. And it's unbelievable what they can do. You'd have to see it to believe it. So they've adapted to be very arboreal. Their keystone value is impressive. They are what's known as the engineers of the forest. And as they're looking for these termites, that there are a lot of times, and bees that basically build themselves into the trunks of trees. The sun bear uses its strength to get these nests out, which in turn controls and helps balance out the number of termites, which you don't want too many termites. You need somebody to go in and help limit them. And by doing this, so that's a great value, keystone value. They have a role to help their ecosystem stay healthy. And without them, the ecosystem wouldn't be as healthy. Such as these holes that they root out, the termites, are the very, very necessary nesting holes for the hornbills, which is a bit like maybe one of the most iconic, charismatic birds in the world. So they definitely have a role. They also have a role as an umbrella species. If we decide that we love sun bears, then we have to preserve huge, very, very intact areas. And so that really is the definition of an umbrella species. Sun bears are fantastic. We want them in the wild. We have to have massive intact wildernesses to keep those populations viable. Now, human perception is where the sun bear really lost its mark. And it's not their fault, it's our fault. But it needs a lot of work. So I decided to score them pretty low. Unfortunately, the sun bear, as far as like maybe cultural value, looking at like, is it like the giant panda where everybody has pandemonium and loves the panda so much? No. Most 95 or 96% of the people in the world, in fact, I bet you probably 75% of the people listening on this webinar really don't know what a sun bear is. That's the problem. How do you learn to love a species if you've never heard of it? The only people in their range that have heard of it looks at sun bears, unfortunately, as for poaching. So they will basically steal little tiny babies away from mom because they make such cute pets. And the mother they usually kill for the very, very valuable parts of its body, the gallbladder and the claws and the bear paws that are used in Asian traditional medicine. So there's a high market for poached sun bears. That's the value, which is bad. It's sad. And then when the cub grows up, they usually just get put in a cage because you got an animal that, like I said, so strong for its size. I mean, it would ruin your house. So they don't stay very good pets for long. But that being said, they do have some really endearing values or characteristics that if you do take the time to learn about them, you begin to fall in love with them. Like this super long tongue made for extracting honey out of honey holes. And the longest claws of any bear, in my opinion, but they have claws that are basically the same length as a brown bear, which is known for its long claws, even though it's a tiny bear. So they're pretty fantastic. The reason they're called sun bears is beautiful sort of sun-colored crescents on their chest, and which is just really amazing. It's gorgeous. And every single sun bear has its own unique chest patch, just like a fingerprint. Ooh. All right, so sun bears. Now that human perception is changing. I'm gonna talk about this really quickly because on the 22nd, you have the guy down there on the lower left. That's Dr. Wong. He is going to do a podcast with me on the 22nd. And he is going to tell, because he is, guys, the Jane Goodall of sun bears and one of the most determined and dedicated conservationists that I have ever heard of and met in my life. He just doesn't get as much notoriety as somebody who studies something more charismatic like an orangutan. He's studying the unknown bear. But he is basically, and we'll tell that story later, but basically by using education, he rescues the sun bears that are caught in those cages, has built a facility to where people can actually view the sun bears in their environment, living a nice life as a jungle bear again. And then when some of the bears get enough skills, release the bears into the wild. And this is a bear that was funded largely by Natural Habitat in order to release her into the wild, and also do a lot of public outreach. So while their human perception right now isn't very good, because of Dr. Wong and the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center, it does have lots of potential to grow. And speaking of that, I want you guys to please tune in to hear Wong talk. You won't believe it. And just to learn a little bit more about it, do your homework before you tune in. You can go to the BSBC Instagram page. It's a good Instagram, just BSBCC. That's an Instagram account actually that I set up for him years ago, and it's doing really well. And it's just a way for you to fall in love with sun bears. And remember, what we love, we save. And they also have a great Facebook page. So great. So we're on, just to keep it kind of quick, intelligence. I said they're super smart, live in a complex place. Not that big, but so super strong for their size. Very adaptable. Anybody has to be very adaptable to live in the Borneo rainforests. The keystone, the Borneo rainforests are more healthy, and they operate better with, especially with, I'm sorry, I think I skipped over, maybe I lost a slide, but seed dispersal is another very important thing. They eat fruit, and that fruit is basically needs a sun bear or another animal like it, and there's not really any animal like a sun bear to eat it and defecate the seed somewhere else. So that's a big deal. Human perception, well, I just talked about that, but I totaled it out at 21 out of 25 because human perception's so low. But like I said, if we all spread the love of sun bears, then we'll be able to save them. So we do need some work. But I do beg you to make the sun bear your favorite bear. Let this little unknown underdog of a bear make a stand. Okay.
Oh man, that's going to be hard to top. Thank you, Brad. Well, so my name is Drew Hamilton, and I've been a bear viewing guide in Alaska for the last 20 years. And when we first
Drew,
yeah,
we're not seeing your presentation. We're seeing your email.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So I'm here to talk about brown bears. I've been a brown bear viewing guide in Alaska for the last 20 years. And when I was first approached about doing this, my first reaction was, come on, right? Brown bears are obviously the best. If you were to look up bear in the dictionary, probably going to be a picture of a brown bear. Now, I'm going to be focusing mostly on these bears in Alaska, but they do exist in a wide variety of habitats. Their historical range, they existed all the way down to Mexico, and then all the way up to the high Arctic, where you've got the barren ground grizzlies. Kodiak Island, Katmai Park, McNeil River State Game Sanctuary, Lake Clark National Park. There are pockets in the lower 48. You think of Yellowstone, you think of Grand Teton. Now, what I really like about brown bears and grizzly bears is when we're available, or when they're available to be watched, they're in their prime, right? So we get to watch them going about the four F's of being bears, right? So a bear's summer consists of fighting, following, fishing, and fornicating, right? So they condense all that right down into the quick northern summer. Now, for intelligence and adaptability, I think they kind of go hand in hand. When you talk about that historical range, and you just think of all the variety of ecosystems and habitats that were available in that traditional range, the bears have had to adapt. Bears like these over in the upper left at McNeil Falls have been, they've adapted to tolerating each other in concentration. I mean, the most bears I ever saw in McNeil Falls is 78 at one time in a quarter-mile stretch of river. Just to have all those bears to be able to adapt to that highly dynamic situation, and then peacefully, mostly peacefully, be able to utilize it as a common food source, or adapting to humans. You think about like this picture in the right, that bear is going about its business despite the disrespectful behavior by the humans. And in terms of like, even I'm here in Anchorage, Alaska right now. There are over 60 brown bears that live in the municipality of Anchorage. You rarely see them. They're highly adept. They've adapted to this urban lifestyle. They move up and down through the riparian zones, the green zones. You don't see them, but they're there. And in terms of intelligence, I mean, you can put numbers to it. You can do all these sorts of things. They're very food smart. If there is food to be had, they're going to figure out how to get it. And in terms, like, I really just wanted to come up with a story that I've seen that would demonstrate their intelligence. And I think back to a bear I used to know, we called Holden, and he is smarter than your average bear, but I think he's not unique. And so he was trying to get into a fishing hole that was being monopolized by a much larger bear. So Holden came in from the left, and you could almost see the wheels turning. And so what he did to get into this one spot, he put a rush on that bigger bear to make him mad. And then when that bear turned around to chase him, he went and he did this big loop. That bear chased him all the way up the hill and back down around, and he came back down and he beat that bigger bear to the fishing hole, grabbed a salmon and took it to go. Like, if that's not thinking it through, if that's not figuring it out, I don't know what is. In terms of strength, this is going to be a tough one to beat. I'm throwing the gauntlet to all of y'all. When brown bears, grizzly bears, they just epitomize strength. You look at their physical adaptations, that big hump on the back, that is all muscle. They're designed for digging holes. They're designed for flipping rocks. I've heard people tell me that brown bears can't climb trees. Well, it's not a function of the bear, it's a function of the tree. It's a matter of finding a tree that can hold up a brown bear. So a good example would be, you think about the big fights these males have. When you sit there and you watch these 1,200-pound male brown bears during mating season fighting back and forth, and you can only marvel at the physical strength, the physical prowess that these guys will put into those battles. You also look at examples of these bears fishing, right? You know, we are but mere humans. It's hard for us to even comprehend what these bears are capable of. So what I want everybody to do is to go stand in a 3-foot deep raging river that's 34 degrees, and I want you to run upstream and catch a salmon in your mouth. Think you could do it? I mean, I could, but I don't know about the rest of you. You'll have to decide for yourselves. But it's just impressive. Look at this bear. This is a bear known as Braveheart, and this is kind of the combination of strength and intelligence. He has learned that if he sits in this raging water and uses his massive body mass and his strength to hold him in position, what he's done is he's created an eddy right there in the river. Not Eddie Savage, an eddy in the river, like a calm spot, and the fish will come right to him. This is the epitome of the smarter, not harder technique. In terms of what these bears mean to humans, they are a bear that you can put dollars and cents to. Like I've been guiding for 20 years, but I've kind of backed off a little bit on the guiding to focus on some conservation here in Alaska, specifically the fight against Pebble Mine. And as part of that fight, we commissioned an economic study from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where we were looking at the value of the bear viewing industry in South Central Alaska. And you can see they're running in, like, there's some numbers in here. It's pushing $40 million that these brown bears, this intact population of brown bears, generates in South Central Alaska, and 79% of that stays in South Central Alaska. Almost 500 jobs in South Central Alaska alone, just from having the charismatic megafauna of the brown bear available to view. Now, this is more of a cultural phenomenon that has really taken hold in the last few years. I don't know how many Brooks, Explore.org Brooks webcam watchers we have, but it is all over the place. I got a message last summer from somebody at a DMV in Ohio, where they had put the webcam up on the TV and people were watching bears fishing while they're waiting for their driver's licenses. Now, from this, there's a whole community. You look at the Facebook page on Katmai Park, where every year they have the Fat Bear Week at the end of the summer. I was out there with the Natural Habitat's Seasons of Solitude trip just the week before Fat Bear Week last year with Justin Gibson. And we were able to go around and watch these bears as they're putting on those last few pounds, getting ready for that competition. And it is just epic to watch. Now, the fact that, just to talk about what these bears mean to people, the fact that there are individual bears, there are individual brown bears that people know and identify with. If you're a webcam watcher, you're gonna know bear 480, Otis, up there in the upper right. If you think down to Grand Teton National Park, over on the left there, we've got bear 399, right? An iconic grizzly bear. Frankly, I went to Grand Teton specifically to find 399, and I spent a lot of money doing it. I went there, I checked it out, I contributed to the local economy just to go see the famous bear 399. If you've ever been to McNeil River, Ears, the bear in the bottom left, there's from a viral video that's been seen over 60 million times. And then, of course, over on the right there, the bottom right, we've got this year's grand champion of the Fat Bear Week competition. This is Holly. And so Holly is immortalized on t-shirts, coffee mugs, this, it goes on and on and on. Merchandising. These bears are generating dollars and cents for our economy. You think about how they've been represented in media. How many people went and saw the Disney Bears movie? I know I did twice. Some of the great cinematography. What bears, these grizzly bears, these brown bears mean to us? If you had a teddy bear, you might still have a teddy bear. I do. It's probably a grizzly bear. You think about some of the Yogi Bears. You think about the brother bear from Disney. Bears symbolize, and these bears symbolize and invoke strong emotions and connections with people. When we talk about them being an umbrella species, here's some kind of, it's kind of boring to look at, but these are bear movement data from the north end of the Alaska Peninsula. So here we've got over on the left, you've got some collared bears, and it looks like the one that ranged the furthest ranged about 60 miles and back. So think about that bear specifically. And actually it was Ears, the one from the other the other slide. That's the bear, that's his movement data. So he moved 60 miles to the west, and then he moved all the way back. If you were to protect habitat for a bear like that, you're going to end up look, it's McNeil River State Game Sanctuary, Refuge, Katmai Park, Katmai Preserve. Over 4 million acres have been preserved to protect this habitat. And in that, you have protections for salmon, you have protections for caribou, for moose, for every species that exists in those different habitats. So by saving habitat for brown bears, you're saving habitat for everything else. Just to highlight that movement data, here's a bear I know very well. This is a bear, Simba, that frequents the Katmai coast, or excuse me, the McNeil River State Game Sanctuary. I watched her for 6 years, and I was up in Kaktovik watching polar bears, and a guy who was there with me pulls out his phone, and he was showing me pictures he took in the Katmai Preserve. Boom, first bear he showed me was a bear I recognized from 60 miles away. These bears move around and they cover a lot of ground. In terms of being keystone species, bears, if you've ever been on a tour with me, that's one of the things I harp on. Bears are nature's can opener, particularly in Alaska. The best example would be the salmon. The salmon represent the conduit. They represent the transportation system for marine-derived nutrients and energy coming up into the terrestrial ecosystem. And it really is the bears that are going to open those up, and they're going to distribute it through the ecosystems. Studies have shown riparian zones are healthier. General ecosystems are supported by the bears going and pooping in the woods, will you? But as the picture on the right demonstrates, it's not just in the woods, it's everywhere. They go everywhere. At the bottom, we've got another shot from the Seasons of Solitude trip, looking at Brooks Falls with the beautiful fall colors. And I just think when you're looking at that picture, what would that riparian zone, what would that ecosystem look like without the bears spreading those nutrients around? Now, unfortunately, there is a bit of a misconception about brown bears and grizzly bears out there. And I think the quote that best summarizes it, and I'm going to rip it off, what most people know about bears has more to do with the nature of stories than the nature of bears. So if you go out into the wilderness and you watch bears, and you will undoubtedly come away with a perception that is not necessarily the one represented in some of those negative aspects of popular media. You look at the bear tales, and everybody can cite examples of bear encounters gone wrong. They're sensationalized, they're all over the news, but they are the small minority of brown bear interactions. You look at, and I know all of us on this panel got our start with brown bears. And we'll be the first to tell you that when you go out there, this is not the image you see. So there is still a little bit of a public relations problem for these bears. So just to rank it, and this was very hard because of course brown bears are the best. And so I did have to ding them on a couple things. Intelligence, I gave them 5 out of 5. I saw a bear doing calculus one time, so I'm going to put that in the plus column. Strength, flipping over rocks, standing in the river, I think those images spoke for themselves. Adaptability, we have to look at their historic range, and we have to look at their ability to adapt to a variety of situations, all the way from the Arctic tundra all the way down to northern Mexico. Urban environments, rural environments, wooded environments, they can adapt to all of them. Their keystone value is through the roof. There was a study done in Alberta where they were looking at their role as a primary seed disperser, and a grad student counted 50,000 blueberry seeds in one pile of bear scat. I'm going to go ahead and take their word for them. I'm not going to check their data, but that's a lot of seed dispersal going on. Cultural value is where they get dinged the most with some of those nasty bear stories are out there, giving them a total of 22 out of 25. And here's where I would just like to talk a little bit about the conservation work I'm doing. We're talking to Wong on the 22nd, but on the 21st, our daily dose of nature is going to be the digital film premiere of a film we made last summer called The Bears of Amactadori, where we're going to be exploring the threats posed by the proposed Pebble Mine to the brown bear populations of the Alaska Peninsula. It's going to be a very informative webinar. We're going to have our film premiere, and we're going to be available for questions and answers about the Pebble Mine. So if you have any questions on that, please save them for the 21st and tune back in. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the polar bear. Can you guys see the screen all right?
Looks good.
Fantastic. I really appreciate all of you guys explaining the incredible features of your bear, but I just don't think they even come near the polar bear. When we're talking about intelligence, the polar bear is the biggest brain. There was a study done at Duke University in 2014, and this was studying intelligence in animals. The researchers were frustrated with how other studies have been done. One animal isolated in an area that's really meant for humans. They were studying self-control. They were studying other forms of intelligence. They did 36 species. They measured the brain of all those species. The polar bear's average brain size is 498 grams, whereas the brown bear is only 234 grams. They found, without a doubt, that absolute brain size, not relative to their body size, but absolute size, is in fact the best measurement of intelligence. That's why we have something like the sperm whale being one of the most incredible animals. Another thing with the polar bears, they're often called the gorillas of North America. They're considered to be as intelligent as gorillas. Now, one of the things that we know about these bears is that they are incredible. The moms are incredible mothers. They have to spend an enormous amount of energy teaching their young ones all of the things that it takes to be a polar bear, navigating great distances, how to hunt for seals, how to avoid conflict. All of those kinds of things the mom puts an enormous amount of energy into, because it takes a lot of intelligence to be a bear, especially a polar bear. They also have to know how to navigate great distances. Some polar bears, males especially, have been seen to be navigating up to 600,000 square miles. That is a vast distance to be able to know how to get around, especially when you're talking about it being really dark, not a lot of landmarks up there. So these guys are phenomenal navigators. Now, when it comes to strength, how can any of the other bears possibly compete with the strength of an animal that stands close to 9 feet tall, that can be as much as 2,000 pounds in weight? These bears are heavy hitters. They can actually pull a beluga whale out of the water. They can pull themselves out of the water. Have you ever been in a swimming pool and tried to get yourself onto the side of the swimming pool without a ladder? These bears can do that, pull their 2,000-pound body out. I will admit 2,000 pounds is the high side for the polar bears, not the average. Still, they're very strong. When it comes to bite force, we're looking at 1,200 pounds per square inch in that jaw. I think it's clear that this bear can do more damage to bamboo than a panda. So we're talking about an incredibly strong mandible. Now, when it comes to adaptations, I will say we've got to make a distinction here. Are we talking about how incredibly well adapted these animals are to their area? Because they have done an amazing job of adapting to a bleak, ice cold, miserable place, right? They've got, okay, it's beautiful, but miserable. They have small ears. They have that long Roman nose that you can see that's literally going to warm the air up as it goes into their lungs. So many different adaptations that make it that they can live in a vast landscape that is not easy. It's even colder than the river that Drew described. Look at the long fur that they have. They've got a couple inches of blubber that's going to keep them warm. However, if we are talking about adapting to a changing world, I know this isn't fun to look at, but I have to say, we are dealing with a bear that is having to learn how to adapt to a world full of water rather than a world full of ice. And that is a question that remains. Can the polar bear get happy with the warm waters, or are they going to only be able to survive in that cold, cold environment that they are so well adapted to? Unfortunately, I have to say that it's likely they definitely need that ice in order to survive. Now, when it comes to this question of who is the keystone species, polar bears knock this one out of the park. Just like we learned from the whales or the wolves of Yellowstone, if you knock out the top predator in an area, the rest falls apart. So these bears are definitely a keynote species. The seals, if they don't eat the seals, then those seals are going to just go berserk. Then they're going to be able to, take out the fish, and that's all the way down to affecting the zooplankton. So you've got to have that top predator. That's what we know about trophic cascades. They are an umbrella species for sure, right? They are an animal that encompasses this huge range: Alaska, Russia, Canada, Norway, Greenland, and then everything in between is where this polar bear lives. If we don't take care of the polar bear, certainly we are going to lose an incredible ecosystem. In fact, they're one of the first animals that was put on the vulnerable list just because of loss of habitat. So that speaks for itself. I want to bring up another thing here, and that's a flagship species. The polar bear is the ultimate poster child for climate change. If we didn't have the images of a skinny bear or a bear that is swimming through water, then maybe a lot of people would not be moved to actually get involved with the fight on climate change. So I would say they're not just a keystone species or an umbrella species, but also a flagship species. Now, human perception. What do we think about these bears? We just fall in love with them. Many of you have probably been on a polar bear viewing trip, and if you haven't, let me tell you, there is nothing like it. The town of Churchill, just as an example, again, I could pick towns in Norway, I could pick towns in other countries, but in Manitoba, Canada, this little town of just 800 people has definitely got its polar bear capital of the world name for a reason. People come from all over to be here and see these incredible bears. It really has done incredible things for the whole province. Now, this is the polar bear holding facility that you're viewing here. And you can see that there's a gorgeous painting that is put on that beautiful building. That is from a photograph that Drew Hamilton took. The artist was inspired. You can see that these bears are inspiring photographers, they're inspiring artists, and of course, people line up to see what's going on with these bears. These are people in Churchill who are about to witness a bear lift. So we have not only learned how much we love these bears, but we've also learned that polar bears lead the way when it comes to polar bear human or bear human conflict and what to do about it. In this small town of Churchill, the bears are brought to jail or the polar bear holding facility when they come anywhere near town. Once they're in jail, that is not the goal to keep them there. They will be tranquilized and flown out to an area that's more safe. So in this case, we have a place that has learned to live with these bears and where the very act of taking care of them has become something that people want to line up to see. It's not just Canada. As I said, and as Drew mentioned, Kaktovik here in Alaska, where I am, is a phenomenal place to go see polar bears. And it's really where we're watching them on the edge as the waters form. So all different kinds of countries are having this opportunity and enjoying this iconic bear. There's really nothing like a polar bear cub to just warm someone's heart and move them to be involved with all kinds of things. So I had to go a little fast on those, but that brings me to my scorecard for the polar bear. Intelligence, the study shows, big brain, super smart, that's what it takes. Strength, who here would put one of these bears up against a polar bear? Maybe Drew would go for the grizzlies, and I will admit that in attitude, the grizzlies win every time. Tiny little grizzlies can scare off a polar bear. So I'll give credit in that area where it's due. Adaptability, well, like I said, if you're going for the icy area and how they've adapted to their ecosystem, they're amazing. But if it comes to a changing world, these bears are definitely going to struggle. Human perception, well, first let's go to keystone value. Keystone, umbrella, and flagship species. All of them are high for the polar bear. So I'm going to give that a 5 out of 5. Human perception, okay, I have to admit, just like Drew said for the brown bear, some perception of polar bears are not all positive. So I'll take a point off for that. My total scorecard is going to be at 22 out of 25. I've been guiding polar bear trips since 1999, and I can tell you this is the best bear. So with that said, folks, we are going to look at the scorecards for all of the bears. And you can see here how they add up. We are now going to open it up to you all to let us know what you think about these bears and who you think is the best bear in the world. So the poll is in progress. You can now go to see who you want to vote for and simply check one of those boxes. The polar bear is on top for a reason, and vote for what you want to vote for. Lee, how we doing?
Well, we've got about 60% of our audience who have voted at this point. There is a front runner. I'm not going to say who that is yet because I don't want to influence the vote. We're up to 75% now who have voted. So I'll just do a last poll now for your vote, and then we'll close the poll and share with everyone. So up to 80% now. Okay, I am going to close the poll and I will share the results with everyone. Here we go.
Sunbear.
Yes!
Oh.
I can't see it. What's up?
We always save the best for last.
Wow. Well, Annie, I guess you did a great job.
Coming in as an underdog. We knew that.
I can't believe
okay, I'll hide.
Panda.
Yep. I'll hide those and let you guys continue on. That's pretty cool.
Well, it is very exciting for us to get to see what other people care about. And I'm sure that this has to do with the bear itself and not our presenting skills. Because we all did it. You guys did a great job there, but polar bears are just the best. Come on, people love them. You got to get that human perception up, Drew.
I do have to say I've got the ironic polar bear hanging over my shoulder here. I do have respect for all the species of bear just because they are such an iconic, industrious, smart family. So thank you.
All right, Lee, how about we open it up to questions now? We're well over time. So what people want to ask.
All right. I will do it. Okay. So we have our friend Odin here. Odin is 11. Okay, this is a sun bear question. This might be a stumper, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Odin would like to know how long the tongue is on a snow bear.
It's something like, I never actually took one out of its mouth and measured it, but it's something like 12 to, I've even heard 16 inches long, which is outrageous. It's like a cartoon character quality feature. But yeah, great question. When you and the way you see it stick its tongue all the way out is they always yawn after they wake up from a nap. So the couple pictures that I showed, I really wanted to get that picture of the long tongue. So I have to just sit there and be ready for 45 minutes or an hour because he could wake up at any time. And then once they wake up, they do it really quick, and you don't have enough time to even put your camera up. So really challenging. But once you see that, oh man, what a cool thing! What a cool bear!
Well, and we also have Odin's brother Vigo with us, who wanted to vote for all of them. He's age 7, and I imagine because they're sharing a computer, they had a little bit of a tussle in their household trying to figure out where the vote was going to land. But I did want to give him a shout out on that. And I also want to say, if you need to leave, I know that we ran a little long. If anybody needs to leave, we'll send you the replay so you can catch what you've missed. So just moving on, another question for you from Patricia. Other than the polar and grizzly, are there other bear pairs that can interbreed?
That's a great question. No. Now, if something happened like in a zoo, there's different stories I think there, but no, it really is a very small number of brown bears and polar bears that are mating. It's not happening across the Arctic. This is just happening in the Baffin Island area, and it's basically one female polar bear who decided that she wanted to mate with a brown bear and then her young. So it isn't quite as big of a phenomenon as people think. But no, it really is just those bears.
Okay. All right. And what we'll make this our last question for today from our friend Isaac. He's 12. This question is for all of you. Do you notice different bear behavior in different locations?
I can start on that one. Yeah, the question was, do we notice different behaviors in different places? And there's certain biological traits that are going to be the same, like mating seasons generally the same season wherever you go for brown bears anyway, same for polar bears. But it comes down to that adaptability. And so those behaviors are going to be indicative of their level of adaptability. And so it can be on a micro scale, it can be on a macro scale, big scale or a little scale, where if you might see bears doing one thing, and this is kind of the problem in that PR thing we were talking about with bears, because over in one place, one person will see a bear do one thing. Over here, another person will see a bear do something completely different. And over there, somebody will see a different bear do something completely altogether off the wall. And suddenly in our collective minds, all bears do all those things, when in reality it was the behaviors of 3 individuals. And so yes, you do see different behaviors in different places.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Brad or Eddie, do you want to answer on that as well?
Eddie, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Same what Drew's saying. You know, within different populations of bears, you almost get different cultures. depending on their habitat, depending on their environment and where they live. Also around people, how they behave around people, how people have interacted with them in the past, and that kind of stuff. Bears are incredibly adaptable to their surroundings, and they often will treat us kind of like, I would almost say the best way they treat us is almost like we're that kind of super harmless bear that they're not too worried about in most cases, unless they've been taught otherwise by people harassing them or being chased or that kind of stuff. They may react in different ways, but oftentimes they're pretty chill, and you can get different behaviors within different groups of bears.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right,
Brad?
good. So Annie, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We can go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll let you go around for closing comments with everybody.
Okay, thanks, Lee. Well, I would just like to finish by saying that I thought this was super fun. I loved making this with my fellow expedition leaders and bear experts here. And I want to thank everybody for showing up today, and especially for voting. That is so cool that you made that extra effort to do that. I'm going to be doing a webinar tomorrow on more of our 3-part series on the 40 tons of delight with the gray whales. And then I'll also be doing one on the 23rd about the 3 seasons of Churchill. So check in for those, and especially on the Churchill one if you're interested in polar bears, like clearly you are. Eddie, any final remarks?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It was absolutely a lot of fun. Brad, Drew, Annie. Actually, I was sitting here just smiling the whole time because it's hilarious. As far as our viewers and listeners, I'm really disappointed that you didn't vote Giant Panda the top. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Drew?
Yeah, again, on this whole voting thing, I think it's rigged, actually. Social media campaign.
Yeah, I'm
Russian
with you on that,
bots.
Drew.
I think there were Russian bots involved in the voting here. You couldn't have polar bears without grizzly bears. They came, evolution, all that stuff. But no, seriously, I do have such respect for all these animals, and thank you everyone for tuning in, because this is just fun to get together and talk, and it's fun to see my friends.
And what about you, Brad?
Yeah, I just really appreciate you guys watching. We love to contribute to you guys being able to put education in your free time when you're, quarantined at home, especially the kids out there. That hopefully that's really what I think is great, is to teach the younger generation this connection with nature. So yeah, tune in to the premiere from Drew Hamilton, the Pebble Mine film. Tune into my webinar with Wong on the 21st. Actually, it'll be the 22nd. Anyway, but you can follow any of us, like on Instagram, and we always post all these little updates on that. Just search our name on Instagram and we come up, and yeah, just help us keep spreading the word about loving the earth and loving these animals. So thanks, guys, for being an audience, and let's keep this going. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lee, for your help. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my
Bye.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to talk about gray whales. So with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye now.